In these uncertain economic times, it's easy to be worried about protecting your wealth, your hard-earned savings, and your family's financial future. Plunging interest rates, the devaluating dollar, and political unrest constantly threaten what you have worked hard to earn and all that you own. That's why now it's more important than ever to protect your assets and have the money you need to make your dreams come true. Welcome to the Global Wealth Fortress Report with successful global entrepreneur and wealth preservation expert Joel Nagel. Joel's helped thousands of people just like you protect what you have so that you can make even more and make your every dream come true. So, sit back and enjoy Joel Nagel's offshore expert advice on how you can live the good life at a great price, where the sun never sets on your financial fortress.
Hello, and welcome to Joel Nagel's Global Wealth Fortress Report. Grab your coffee because we got a great topic coming up here, okay? I had a friend of mine from Manhattan, very wealthy lady, asked me the other day, Carter, you do all this offshore stuff. What's the difference between an offshore trust and an offshore foundation? And I told her that's a very difficult question for me to answer since I have no idea. But fortunately for you, every Thursday I talk with the expert on it, Joel Nagel. So Joel, come in and educate us on this. How are you?
Good, Carter. It's good to be with you. I'm over on the other side of the world where it's actually getting kind of late, and so I'm not sharing coffee with you. Otherwise, I'd be up all night. But it's a great question, and I do get that question a lot. At the highest level, a foundation comes from civil law countries, and trusts come from common law countries. So common law countries are UK, US, Canada, Belize, Australia, New Zealand. Those are classic common law. Civil law, flows from the Napoleonic Code. So you have France, Spain, Germany, most of Latin America, because of Spain and what have you. Many parts of Asia and the Middle East follow the civil law model. Now, it's not exactly fair to say that they're clones of each other, but they're really designed to serve the same purpose. Now, trusts have been around forever. I mean, the trust is the oldest sort of way to conduct business. The modern era trust has been around over 1,000 years.
Wow.
So it dates back to the Middle Ages. You had the Knights Templar going off to Jerusalem to fight in the Crusades, and the family's wealth was structured in such a way, and even the king and the obligations that the king made for these knights were put into these types of special purpose vehicles that would support them. If they got injured, it would care for them. And it really made the distinction between money that you hold or money that the king held for themselves versus money that was being held in this kind of special entity. And, the courts in the UK and now around the world have recognized that distinction. And what that means is, I'm not trying to speak legalese gobbledygook. What that means is when I put an asset into a trust, it's no longer mine. Okay. It has a distinct legal persona, right? The trust is not me. The trust is not even the trustee, and the trust is not the beneficiary. It's sort of this newfangled persona that was invented through the creation of the trust. So we have this trust entity. It's a juridical person, meaning it has a citizenship. It has the citizenship of where it's created. So if I create a trust for you in Belize, well, you have a Belize trust. If I create a trust for you in the Cook Islands, you have a Cook Islands trust. And, that can be important. Sometimes we want to have a U.S. domestic trust. Sometimes we want to have a foreign trust. Now, going back to the Middle Ages and then coming back up through, On the civil side, we get into the early part of the late part of the 18th century, early part of the 19th century. You had Napoleon in France, who incidentally, Napoleon, the Napoleonic Code wasn't just named after him. It's called the Napoleonic Code because he wrote it. And so that a lot of people think of him as an emperor or as a general, as a conqueror, but he was also a great legal scholar along the lines of Thomas Jefferson. And if you go to France today, 95% of the French civil code that exists is the way that Napoleon wrote it 200 years ago.
So he was a brilliant man.
Yeah, absolutely. He was a brilliant man. But he saw this way that common law trusts had developed in the United Kingdom and in the English speaking world, and he really didn't like it. He didn't like this notion of there being a separate juridical person, or that you could basically, in his view, you were screwing your creditors, legitimate creditors, by placing money into this sort of special thing called a trust. So, and under the Napoleonic Code, he forbade the creation of trusts. So another 100 years goes by in the civil law countries without the creation of something that is akin to the common law trust, until the early part of the 19th century, when we have then the creation through statute, right? So the legislature in France, in Germany, in Italy, in Spain, they basically created something called a foundation.
Okay.
And a foundation is in some ways similar to a trust, in that there's it is a separate distinct juridical person, but in other ways it's more like a company, because instead of having like one trustee, you have basically a board that functions like a board of directors. So you can have multiple people in positions of power. So, again, we could spend hours on this topic. They exist in some countries, they have both, but for the most part, common law trusts exist in common law countries, and civil law foundations exist in civil law countries.
Great.
And so for me, if I'm working with a client, I want to know where they live, where their property, where their assets are, and I'm going to tend to want to use the structure that matches the jurisdiction where they're trying to hold and preserve and protect assets. So it's if people say, well, which is better? I would say, well, that all depends. If I'm trying to do something in Europe and I have a Swiss bank account and I own property in Germany, and maybe another piece of vacation property in Italy, and I'm probably going to use a foundation. On the other hand, I'm putting money offshore in a jurisdiction like Belize. I've got bank accounts in the UK, Australia, Canada, countries like that. Well, I'm probably going to use a trust. So they can be used interchangeably. There are distinctions and differences, and quite honestly, beyond trusts and foundations, we could get into a lot more things. Companies and LLCs and IBCs for international business companies, they all serve a role. So the key is knowing which ones to use in which circumstances, in which jurisdictions, and that's really what I've been doing for the last 32 years.
All right, two quick questions occurred to me as you were explaining them. First, on the trust, I heard you say something to the effect of it's no longer your money. You see what I'm saying? It wasn't exactly that, but that the money was under a different entity almost.
Yeah, sure.
Right.
So if I create a trust, the trust document lays out what's supposed to happen to that money. It lays out the where, the when, the how, the why, in what circumstances. Now, I could create a trust myself, and I could be a beneficiary. In some jurisdictions anyways, in other jurisdictions you can't be. And the beneficiaries of a trust are the people who basically get the money. But the beneficiaries aren't the legal owner. And you were the legal owner before you put it in the trust. But when you put it in the trust, you're no longer the legal owner. So if somebody sues you you can be dragged into court. You can put your hand on the Bible and swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And when you're asked about the assets, well, you don't have any. What do you mean you don't have any? Well,
Okay.
I gifted them to a trust, 5 years ago. Here's all the paperwork that evidences that. And if you want to go and try to sue the foreign trust, have at it. But you're going to be bringing lawsuits in places like the Cook Islands, like Belize, like Panama, like Liechtenstein. And these jurisdictions are very favorable towards the creator of the trust and the trustee. They're very hostile towards plaintiffs. Whereas in the US, we live in a very pro-plaintiff world. So that's the real reason why more and more people want to create companies, trusts, foundations, trusts offshore. It really has nothing to do with tax. People would say in the olden days, people would, it was cloak and dagger. People were hiding their money. Well, we know that in this sort of era we live in now with FATCA and,
Right.
all the rules and regulations and disclosure, there's none of that anymore. Everybody's whiter than white. But you can still create this separate legal juridical person that's not you, that's in a different jurisdiction. And then basically what you're telling a plaintiff in the future, hey, if you want to go after this money, have at it. But, you're not going to get it from me. So go try to sue a trustee in Belize and see how far you get with that. It's impossible. So that's the protection element. And that's my job, is to help clients really maximize the protection element.
So on the one hand, it protects the money against litigation. On the other hand, I can't just reach in and pull out $100,000 for a new Lamborghini or whatever, or 200,000, right?
Well, it depends on how the trust is written. You could be a beneficiary. You could, receive what's called a discretionary distribution. And of course, it depends on how much money you put in the trust. If you put, $20 million in the trust and need a few $100,000 a year back, I don't think any trustee would blink twice at that. But the reason you really create a trust is really more not only for asset protection, but it has a strong estate planning element as well. So normally if a client comes to me, they want to protect an asset, but they also want to preserve it for their children, grandchildren. And so while they might be a beneficiary themselves, maybe they want to set it up in such a way that they could get distributions if they need it. But normally people that create those types of structures don't really need it, or don't expect that if they put the money in today, they might, need it tomorrow. Maybe in retirement. I have plenty of people in their 40s and 50s, and, they list themselves as a discretionary beneficiary with the idea that they might get retirement income, from a foreign trust or something like that. But really it's about, protecting the wealth, growing the wealth during their lifetime, and passing it on to their heirs, but not in a lump sum like a will or an insurance policy, because the trust, again, it's its own juridical person, and it follows the way the trust was written. So if you say, hey, Junior's going to get this money when he's 35 or 55 or 95, or he can get the money for, starting a business or a down payment on a home. I want to help my children, but I don't want to turn them into glorified, welfare bums.
Right.
That's what I love about practicing in this area. My job is to really know and understand the client, what they want, what they don't want, and then, sort of craft the legal document, whether it's a trust, whether it's a foundation, that best, helps the client achieve their goals. And most clients, particularly if they're leaving large amounts of wealth, they don't want to leave it as a lump sum. They want to let it be spread out over time. In some cases, clients create something called a dynasty trust, which means only the income of the trust can come out and the corpus never comes out. So, the trust is designed to go on and on and on, hence the word dynasty. So, I love working in this field because, there's no end to how much creativity and imagination you can have. Most of the asset protection jurisdictions give you the ability to, without a lot of, legislation saying you can't do this and you can't do that. I do a lot of work in Belize where they basically say, hey, if it doesn't violate public policy, you can do it. So,
Good.
I can't create a trust to support, a drug trafficking cartel. right? I couldn't do that because that's illegal. It goes against public policy. But what if I want to create a trust for my heirs that goes on for the next 1,000 years? No one says I can't, so I guess I can. And that's really why we like those types of jurisdictions so much.
Excellent. Thank you. That explained it perfectly. Before I get to my foundation question, one more quick question about trust. Do they accrue interest, or does the money just sit there?
Well, it's going to depend how the trust assets are invested. And that's usually something that's discussed in advance or with a trustee. A lot of trusts have independent investment managers that actually manage the assets. Sometimes the client gives sort of general direction to the trustee, but the trustee manages the assets. And again, I mean, if you put $1 million in a trust and the trustee is told to go out and buy $1 million worth of gold, then there's $1 million of gold sitting in the trust.
Okay.
And that might go up and down in value, but there's no income. On the other hand, the trust could do anything you could do. It could buy CDs, treasuries, bonds, stocks, and own property, rent property. And so if the trust generates income, then you're not avoiding the tax consequences by putting the assets in a trust, even if you put it in an offshore trust, because under the Internal Revenue Code, the tax obligations flow back through the trust to the grantor. So if you create the trust, Carter, for your wife, and next year the trust makes $100,000, you're still stuck paying the income tax, unfortunately, on that $100,000. So you can't escape that. But what you can do is make sure that those assets are legally beyond the reach of potential future creditors. And, we get a lot of people, mixed families, second marriages, age, differences where, the grantor, the person creating the trust, wants to create little pockets. Hey, I want this wealth for my wife. I want this wealth for my kid. I want this wealth for charities, whatever. And we use the trust as a vehicle to sort of divide up, who gets what, again, where, when, and how. Maybe the spouse gets income for life, but no corpus, and then the corpus goes to the kids. So there's a million different ways you can slice and dice assets when you put them in a trust.
Excellent. Thank you. Foundation question now. That clear on the trust. Thank you. Foundation question. I think based on what you said, it sounds like a foundation is a corporation with a board. Can they do a hostile takeover and take my money? I mean, that's the first question I would have. Say, wait a minute.
Yeah, so that's a great question. But remember, the foundation itself and the people who serve on the board have a fiduciary obligation to the person that created the foundation. In a lot of jurisdictions like Panama, which has been very famous for foundations, you yourself can be a board member. Generally, you wouldn't want to be the only board member, and you wouldn't want there to be one board member. You wouldn't want there to be two board members. So you want there to be at least three. We generally recommend that it be an odd number, right? So 3 or 5, or sometimes if it's a really big foundation, 7. And the individual can help lead and direct the decision-making process. But the decision-making process, rather than being written out in great detail as it is with the trust, when I draft a trust, I'm telling not only the current trustee, but all future trustees, thou shalt do this, thou shalt not do that, right?
All right.
It's
all right.
30, 40, 50 pages of thou shalts and thou shalt nots. With the foundation, it's generally much easier to create because it is more like a company, but you're laying out the purpose of the foundation. The purpose of the foundation could be, to protect and advance the wealth of Carter Clues. And if that is the mission of the foundation, then the people on that foundation board will be striving to carry out that mission and obligation. Now, if you hire all professional members of the foundation board, then it's back to being very much like a trust. It would be like a trust with multiple trustees, and that every time they take action, they have to get together and vote, right? It's more, because it does function more like a board. But, again, the asset is shifted from you to the foundation. So again, you can go into the court, put your hand on the Bible, and swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and declare that those assets are not yours. So in that regard, foundations and trusts are very, very similar. But the operation of the trust is governed by the trust document as laid out by the lawyer who drafted it, and sort of implemented and carried out by the trustee. With the foundation, it's broader. Um, it's a broader goal as to what's to happen, and then the minutia, the day to day, the decision making is left to the board.
But can the board of the foundation get together and say, Carter at 75 years old has clearly lost his mind, so we are going to take over the assets? Like Steve Wynn's wife did something similar to him with his hotel chain, right? Can that happen?
Yeah, well, I get, in theory it could happen, but in reality, the foundations and the foundation boards and the jurisdictions that permit this type of creation of legal entities, it is to preserve and protect the interests of the person creating the foundation.
Oh, good.
And so, if you really did lose your marbles, it might be that, okay, the foundation, our short-term goals and objectives have changed because now Carter needs to go into a nursing home and we have to divert funds for you to be there. But they couldn't just go off and say, hey, now we want to use this money to support a political candidate or pay ourselves big salaries, because they do have this fiduciary obligation to you. Now, the goals can change over time, because at some point in time, you might not be around, and then the list of people who benefit from the foundation could change. Your spouse, your children, your grandchildren, depending on who all the members are. And again, if it serves the purpose, then then the foundation members are really doing their job, quite honestly. If the foundation goes on for 2, 3, 4, 5 generations, and they're doing their job, making money, they're going to be doing things that you, the person who created the foundation, could never even have dreamed of.
That's right.
And that's the flexibility that people like about foundations. And sometimes they say that doesn't really exist in the trust world, because in the trust world, you're literally writing down on paper what the trustee can do and what the trustee can't do. And look at, for example, Bitcoin. We've had a number of conversations recently about Bitcoin.
Right.
Well, what if you created a trust 15 years ago? Probably you have no, when it gets to the investment sector, and it talks about the types of things you can invest in and types of things you can't. Well, if you did a trust, probably there's no mention of Bitcoin. And if you did a foundation, probably there's no mention of Bitcoin. The trustee is probably not able to invest in Bitcoin because they don't have the explicit permission to do that in the trust document. Foundation, they take it to the board and say, hey, there's this new thing called Bitcoin. We think this helps advance the financial interests of the family. And if the majority of the board members approve, presto, now the foundation, even though it was created pre-Bitcoin, turns around and invests in it. So you can see there really are advantages and disadvantages. Some people want the flexibility of the foundation. Others want the rigor and stricture of the trust, right? They want the trustee to be the no guy, right? They want the trustee to say, this isn't what the trust says. The answer is no. Can I have money for this? No. Can I have money for that? No. Right? Whereas with the board, you go to the board, and if you're persuasive, you convince the majority of the board members, hey, this is, within the overall, goals and objectives of the family. We think we should get money for it. Even though Junior is a terrible business person and, has launched 4 companies and they've all gone bankrupt, the foundation is probably more likely to give them money. The trustee probably just say no, and that's the end of it.
Joel, this has been terrific, folks. I think you are brilliant. I'm just going to say it outright. Folks, I think you see why now. If you set up a trust or a foundation, you better go here first and get Joel's help, because as well as he explained it, it is complicated.
Well, and to be fair, Carter, I mean, I've spoken at, conferences all over the world on this topic, and, to give a presentation, 1, 2, up to 4 hours. We just crammed it in 20 minutes. So it is a lot to take in. I think the big takeaway is really to look at these things as tools that can help you protect and preserve your wealth. And whether you decide the trust is the right tool, or the foundation is the right tool, again, it's working in the direction to help you. If you do nothing, well, you're kind of, at the whims of the court system, would be plaintiffs that decide to sue you. And so this is all about planning for lawsuits, planning for estate planning for your death, planning for, the divorce of your 4-year-old daughter 30 years from now. I mean, that's the kind of discussions we have with clients to try to help them think about all the things in their life and how this can help and assist them. And, the help and assistance is making sure that nobody can come and rip the rug out from under your legs and take your money away from you, the money that you've worked hard to earn and save and invest. So that's really what I'm all about. I feel strongly that, there's very, very few circumstances where people should forcibly be able to take your money. And, we want to use these types of structures as the correct legal way. We're not evading taxes. We're not doing anything nefarious. We're just using the tools, in the case of the trust, that have been around for over 1,000 years to protect and preserve what's yours.
Fantastic, Joel. Thank you. This has been terrific. It is absolutely, obviously, it's been an education because I started at ground zero, and now at least I have enough knowledge to know I need Joel Nagel. So
well, call your friend in New York back and give her a rundown.
I'll tell her to give you a call. Joel, thank you. Terrific.
Thank you, Carter.
I appreciate it, folks. So there you go. You have a choice. You want to do foundation and trust offshore, nagellaw.com, or it's a roll of the dice. There you go. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week. Let's do this thing.